r/ask Reddit. What is the dumbest idea you have ever had that actually worked? In university I was late on an assignment that was supposed to be in my TA's Dropbox by noon that day. I didn't manage to get there until almost 3, so I was sure he had already emptied it. Now, the drop boxes were literal boxes in cubbies with a slot on the front and a lock on them that prevented them from being pulled out. The rack holding them was just a basic metal frame with about 5 rows of boxes. My TA's box was somewhere in the middle of the shelf. So I figured, I'm late anyways, why not take a chance? And slipped my assignment into the box below my TA's box. I got my assignment handed back a few weeks later than everyone else, and it had a note from another TA scribbled on it that said, "Looks like this fell into my box by mistake." I got full marks on the assignment. That's genius. The trick is to make the professor reasonably believe that it was their own error, or some genuine accident or circumstance beyond the student's control. I used to send in papers late via I made an error in the email file by crafting fake corrupted files, or realistic FWDs, of a previous pre-due date email containing my paper in which I had accidentally made a typo in their email address. Similar, but also not so similar. When I was in high school I was sick and out for about 2 weeks, and the day I came back we had a test in my math class for a chapter I almost completely missed. My math teacher warned us that it was the hardest math test of the year due to how complex and fast the chapter was. I walk into class reading this test and I could not even try and bullshit an answer on the short answer page. I could only answer the multiple choice questions because there were options given. My teacher allowed us to rip our test sheets from the staple due to the formulas being provided. I was too embarrassed to hand in a full sheet of something I didn't even attempt. So I simply took the sheet with the short answers, put it in my pocket, and handed in only the sheet with the multiple choice questions formulas. I put it on the pile on her desk while she was helping another student so she wouldn't realize I was dreading the day she was handing these tests back. 4 weeks and the day finally arrived. She came up to me at the table I was sitting at work for my friends and said she needed to have a private conversation with me regarding the test. I was freaking out and thought I was going to get in trouble for cheating. I went to go talk to her and she said, "I lost your test, I played dumb," and she agreed to give me a mark based on the averages of all my other math tests. Basically based on what I handed in, which mind you was the only part I actually completed. I should have received 11% and I ended up getting something in the high 70s. I once faked being sick when I was in middle school and told my mom I had a sore throat and felt a cold coming on. She took me to the doctor and it turned out that I did, in fact, have strep throat. LOL. Task failed successfully. A lot of times I've faked sick in my life I've wound up actually being sick. I've started recognizing the inexplicably strong urge to bail on something as one of my first symptoms when I'm actually getting sick. In college I was taking a class that required me to purchase an online textbook and workbook that was registered under your name, basically ensuring that each student would have to buy a new online copy each semester instead of buying used textbooks. I had a friend who took this class a semester before me, so we came up with the idea to message customer service and explain that I had recently gotten married, so my last name had changed, and I legally changed my first name from my friend's first name to my first name, and I would need them to change it in their system. It totally worked and the rep even congratulated me on my marriage. I think it's nearly criminal to enforce students to buy new books instead of used ones, especially when it's the professor's own textbook. I've never had a prof who wrote the textbook, but for one class another prof had written the textbook. First day of class the writing prof showed up and passed around a flash drive with his book on it. I used to know a guy who, every week, would order his Saturday night curry for delivery while sitting in the pub and then walk over the road to the curry house and get it and himself delivered home. This went on for about 10-12 weeks. One week, we were sitting having a pint and the owner of the curry house walked in, took his order, and had him picked up from the pub. He said it was easier for everyone concerned. That's the most British thing I've ever read. I often forget that Indian food for Brits is akin to Mexican food for the US. It makes sense historically, too. I used a soap bottle as a makeshift sink plunger. And this worked. I'm impressed. Yeah, the neck of the bottle fit the drain near perfectly, so I just had to stuff a rag into the overflow drain. I didn't want to use my toilet plunger in my sink, so this was what I did. Bobcat tire blew during a job. Had another tire, but no jack. Positioned the Bobcat behind a dump truck. Bobcat then tries to lift the ass end of the dump truck. Dump truck hella heavy. Bobcat lifted itself instead. Tire changed and back to work. That sounds like a good way to end up crushed by a skid steer. It was a dicey situation to say the least, but it was far superior to any other idea being suggested at the time. I even remember me saying this is a bad idea, and it was my idea. Osha would like to know your location. Put Jesus in his Wi-Fi password in church. It worked. Ha, Jesus really is the answer. Far from the dumbest working idea in the thread, but I once got an extra day to work on a video project in high school by coming to class with a video that was just a quarter second of blackness, eagerly volunteering to go first, then acting confused and scared when the file didn't work. The teacher took pity on me and told me to just bring it the following day, and I got to finish it that evening and still got full credit as if I did it on time. I once completely blanked on an essay assignment and didn't realize till I was sitting in class. Luckily, the teacher didn't collect the essays till the end of class and I proceeded to write the whole paper in my notebook during lecture. When people were handing in essays, I went up and told the teacher that I forgot to print it, but I had a version in my email, showing him the handwritten one to prove I had completed the assignment. He let me go print it and I typed the whole thing up in like 5 minutes, ran back, handed it in and got like a C or B. Couldn't argue that since I was about to get a 0. I just got PTSD imagining writing an essay in class again. Breaking into my own house through the kitchen window using a piece of wire and a wooden table after I was locked out. I want to hear how the duck you did this. Well, I arrived home with my mom and my little cousin and we realized we forgot the keys at my grandma's house, way the hell across the city. Mom calls my dad to bring his keys. He was working at the time and he'd take an hour to arrive, so we'd have to wait outside. I went full hell no mode and kept looking for other ways in. Turned out that one of the tiny back windows was open, but there was a safety pin that kept it from opening all the way up and the only way to remove it was unscrewing it. So I grabbed a wooden clothespin that was lying there, broke it, removed the wire that kept it together because it was just the right size to unscrew the window pin. I did it, pulled a table underneath the window so I could climb inside, and just like that I managed to successfully break into a house at age 13. Hey, Alpha, so you said that you couldn't enter your house that one time? What did you do? Well, I fucking broke a clothespin, tore the wire off a window, and I grabbed me a goddamn table, and then. A true alpha move. Not my idea but my mom's. I dropped one of my earrings and couldn't find it, so she threw my other earring on the floor and it happened to land next to the first one. Brother, go find your brother. Adventures of Tom Sawyer. That's not dumb. Your mom is clearly just a witch. It probably wouldn't work in this day and age, but back when I was young I was tired of retail and wanted an office job. I just lied my ass off and pulled a total George Costanza what with friends coached to answer their phones as a business and such. Got hired as an admin assistant and been steadily moving up since. I think about doing this all the time to start a new path. Just scared I will not be able to BS my way in the door. What are they gonna do? Fire you? Yeah, I tried this once, but apparently you need to show a degree to be a surgeon. We had a noisy rotating rooster weather vane, loud enough to keep people awake on windy nights, despite having been lubed, so I filled the hole the rooster rotates in with Crisco, even though people said it was a dumb idea and wouldn't work. Never had to lube it again because the Crisco didn't break down like other lubes. I have a similar story. Kitchen shears rusted at the joint between the two blades to the point where it took significant pressure just to move them at all. Googled solutions that seemed tedious and required buying food grade cleaners and lubrication, which didn't seem worth it for cheap kitchen shears. So I just dropped some olive oil in there and they've been fine since. People forget that oils and such originally were all animal or plant-based derivatives. Not everything needs to be made in a lab to be quality. Great solution. Consider me part of people. Thanks for the reminder. When I was brand new to the army, we were training with another unit and we had to defend the urban combat area, Mount Site, from an incoming force. We were only allowed a few hours to prepare. One guy suggested that we set up tripwires to, at least, slow them down. The doors are all painted bright blue, and all anyone had was my package of black 550 cord, parachute cord, that could easily be seen. Setting this up, we thought there was no way they would miss it. I was wrong. Instead of checking the door, like they were supposed to, the opposing force simply tried to rush through. I almost couldn't return fire due to the fact I was laughing so hard. I even put a piece, just below knee level, in the doorway to the room I was in. I turned around when I heard people falling over each other. I looked and almost the entire squad was crawling on top of each other trying to get up. I put my weapon on burst and emptied the magazine. Then fumbled with my last one as I started to laugh even harder than before. After I blindly fired down the hallway, I just leaned against the wall and the entire group and myself just looked at the scene and started laughing. Then their platoon leader came running in and tripped over the same cord. At this point I was done. Put my weapon on safe, put it against the wall, and tried not to piss my pants over the whole situation. LOL, that's awesome. Wish we had something like this in the Air Force. We had to protect our deployment free on board overnight, which was just taking turns not getting sleep and sitting outside the tents and entrances to the camp. The instructors never even tested getting in. So what do you end up shooting anyways? Blanks or paintballs? Live ammo. They're all dead. He's a madman. We were at a friend's house about to cook a roast. It needed to be patted dry with paper towel, but he was all out. I semi-jokingly suggested using a couple slices of bread. We all chuckled at the idea. It worked perfectly. I might do this on purpose the next time I cook meat that needs to be patted dry. Thanks for the idea. Also a great tip for skimming fat. Yep. Then drop that fat-soaked bread onto a warm frying pan until it crisps up. I do not wonder why the doctor frowns upon my diet. One time I sent a letter to a local address by putting the return address as the address I wanted it to go to, not putting postage, and dropping it off in a public mailbox. Went to them, returned to sender due to insufficient postage. A friend of mine in junior high used to do this all the time to send me random letters. Instead of using his own name, he always gave funny names on the return address. To this day I still remember the name Skippy Wayner. To the best of my knowledge, there are no laws about how you address the specific person when you mail something, though someone please correct me if I'm wrong. I've sent packages to my mom with that crazy woman who lives here at address, and similar stuff with no problems except that my mother doesn't think I'm as funny as I do. Hit the router slap. Thanks. If in doubt, give it a clout, words that I will forever live by. Was really desperate to leave past employer after 15 years. Had been applying and interviewing and striking out. Finally got an interview at a place where, at the time, I felt, I am not really sure this is right for me, but anything is better than where I am at. Instead of prepping for the interview, rehearsing answers, etc., I pulled an Office Space. I was cocky, brash, unconcerned. Made it seem like I was happy where I was at and didn't really care if I got the job or not. They called me back the next week and I waited a week to return their call. Same deal with the second interview. When they offered me the job, I hemmed and hawed. Said I needed to think about it really hard, and that it was a big move for me, etc., etc. I came back and demanded well over $15,000 above what they were offering in salary. They accepted. Sometimes I use a pin to separate my eyelashes after I apply mascara. Supposedly Audrey Hepburn's makeup artist used to do this. I just hope nobody ever sneaks up on me while I'm doing it. I haven't heard of anyone being blinded that way yet. I forgot to bring a resume to a job interview, but I had an index card in my bag. I cut the index card in half and wrote my name, my contact info, and creative problem solver in my best handwriting, and gave a copy of my business card to both the interviewers. I got the job. This idea could have easily gotten me fired if it went wrong. I was working as art director at an animation studio, making videos for clients. One client was especially pesky about the use of yellow in the background. They wanted it to be that of their logo, which was this horrible neon piss yellow. We advised against it, but after numerous calls we had to cave and gave a version with that color. They hated it and asked for a change. What followed were 12 versions with numerous calls in between tweaking the color over and over. Eventually I got tired of it and just sent the original version again. I didn't even bother to rename the file. The client said this looks exactly the way I wanted. Thank you. How that ever went right I still have no idea. When I was younger I got called into HR because I drew a very detailed picture of a penis. It was really good. The HR meeting happened like a week after I drew it and my only defense was I don't recall doing that. Do you happen to have the picture? It might jog my memory. They didn't have it of course because I had it. And because I didn't confess they couldn't do shit. Investigation results inconclusive. Have a nice day. But do you still have it? No, but I can give more detail. It was wearing a Santa cap and the gist was his beard. It was around Christmas time. I'm confused. Did someone else see you drawing it and reported you? Also, why the shit are you drawing Santa penises at work? Wearing a motorcycle helmet while snowblowing. I did it because I missed riding. It kept my face warm and when snow would fly back at me the visor would protect me. OMG, this has to be the stupidest looking activity, but so effective. Snowblower XTREME. I'm stuck on a cliff, but if I jump at a really sharp angle at that gravel field, I could just slide down there and be fine. Just like in TV. Every time I think about this I am amazed I'm not either flattened by a rock or impact against something. Childhood really is just the tutorial level sometimes. Childhood is just a game in attempting death in any way possible. I hated my math teacher and she was making us do a project on patterns even though we were in 7th grade. So my pattern was a series of increasingly longer sideways penises. She didn't even notice and I got an A. Surprised you didn't get the D. When I was young and broke I bought a sofa from a used furniture store. I had no way to take the sofa home. I went to a used car lot a couple of blocks away and took a truck for a test drive. In my freshman year of college, my grades were really not great, and my parents were really strict about getting good grades. When my dad asked to see my grades, I panicked and did the inspect command on the computer where you can change typefaces on the screen to read different words and letters. I changed all of my shitty grades to good grades. My dad was so happy that I did good my first year of school. He asked me to print my results. I did, and turns out he had to send them to our car insurance company for a good student discount. Ultimately, I committed insurance fraud by accident, but I got the discount. Life hack: commit insurance fraud. When I was like 7 years old I was playing in my back garden with those incredibly bouncy little balls you got, just bouncing them high off the house and letting them bounce randomly before trying to catch them, as you did. One time I went for this huge throw off the wall and it bounced crazily off various surfaces so fast I completely lost track of it. So my 7-year-old logic was to stand back in the same place and throw another ball the same way. I watched it bounce this way and that about 10 times before finally hitting a plant and coming to a rest in a flower bed. I went over to pull back the foliage and sure enough there were both balls literally lying touching each other in the mud. At the time I was like, yep, makes sense. But over the years since then I've often thought about it and how the hell it worked. My headphones kept cutting out, so I took a toothpick and scraped the inside of the headphone jack on my phone. Several clumps of dust fell out, and afterwards the headphones worked just fine. Did the same with the charging port on my phone. I'd been assuming the contacts were broken or the cable was, but no, the plug just wasn't staying in well enough. If I stop showing coworkers how to use Excel, I'll get to do all the easy Excel stuff while simultaneously being patted on the back for doing the hard stuff on the team no one else could. Basically, unless you want to be super upper management and give your life to your work, play clueless. Don't let them know you could simplify a report that takes several days into literally minutes. SHHHHHHHHH. Someone else will take tech credit and then you'd have more to do. Using a pocket knife to Skyrim lockpick a door. There was a swarm of hornets that had made a nest under the front of our porch with only one specific narrow entry in or out. Spray wouldn't work and it was right under our front door, so had no way to keep exterminating them. Then I realized why not wearing blades of metal. We did have an old 50s metal fan and I could maybe blow them away from the entrance so they had no way to get in. The unanticipated effect was that it worked, though after a few hours had created a civil war battlefield of dead or dying hornets piling up like a zombie tower in World War Z. Every few moments you'd hear thunk as another hornet fell into the trap. So satisfying. I was pulled over for speeding by a state trooper with a car full of friends in college. I didn't have time to explain to them what I was about to do, and to just go with it. Officer is walking with that swagger walk they do when they do they're gonna write a ticket, and he comes up to the window and I'm having a full-on asthma attack, wheezing and rocking back and forth saying my inhaler ran out. Trying to get to a Walgreens for a new one, the guy was like, oh shit, follow me. I got a police escort to buy a pack of gum. Got out of the ticket. Mixing strong coffee with Monster Energy. It worked because I wrote half a book in one sitting. It was dumb because, well, had a video card die on me. Thought that maybe the solder had melted away from it overheating. So I had the idea to stick it in the oven briefly to melt the solder into place. Looked online and it is apparently a normal thing to do. Worked like a charm. My parents used to run a bed and breakfast, and we used to keep a section of the house locked. Only light security was just supposed to stop guests accidentally going into our living space. We used to keep the key on top of a door frame. Turns out the frame was hollow and there was a hole on the top. I put the key up there. It fell into the hole but didn't sound like it dropped all the way to the floor. 14-year-old me didn't realize taking the door frame off isn't a major job. So I was a bit worried my parents would kill me. Found myself a wire coat hanger. Straightened it out and attached a magnet to the end to go key fishing. It was more out of desperation than anything else, but it somehow worked. I was like 7 and had a loose tooth that I couldn't pull out. Tried to string attached to the door. Didn't work. So I tied a string to it and tied the other end to my dog's collar. Threw a tennis ball. Bye bye tooth. A storm broke a limb on a tree hanging over my house in my backyard, but it was still hanging on by a few splinters. I didn't want it to fall, and it wasn't in a place where I could use my ladder to get to it. So I found some rope, tied a brick to it, threw the brick and rope over the limb, made a crude rope swing, and swung and pulled at the branch until it finished breaking. It wasn't until I was using the chainsaw to cut it up that I realized how many times during my stupid idea I could have easily hurt or even killed myself. When I was in college we had to sneak beer and other booze into the dorms, as it was a dry campus and we were also under 21. Fortunately for us, we lived in an old converted motel, so we would remove the air conditioner from the wall, which gave us direct access to outside. Once we also removed the grate on the outside. Since we lived on the ground floor, we then made 2 hinges for the grate on the outside, so it would stay attached and could swing open and closed. When we wanted to sneak stuff in, we would jiggle the AC unit loose and remove it, pulling it into the room, swing open the grate, and pass the booze through. I consider it brilliant, but many others thought we were stupid. Worked every time though. Something broke on the front wheel of my car while I was on a cross-country trip, and it made a terrible noise and smoke. It was the middle of the night and the shops in the town we pulled into were all closed. I jacked it up to see what was wrong, took off the wheel, and then the jack tipped over and the car dropped onto the exposed brake disc. I did it again and the same thing happened. I jacked it up again. Still couldn't figure out what was wrong. Put the wheel back on, and whatever it was had been fixed by the jolts. I drove that car for years with no further problems. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.